Hello, I'm Eduardo, also known as Cavernhead. I'm here to spread the stuff from within the caves in my head to the world. I have spent a lot of time experimenting with different game mechanics, testing out different ideas. On this video I thought I would share one of them. Before we dive into the prototype, I want to explain a few things about the design process that I used, which I find specifically interesting. I continued using this process in a lot of other games. It's especially good for games in which you want a lot of procedural content generation. I went about it in two steps. I designed a simulation, and then I made a game that works within the simulation. For step 1, the initial simulation was meant to be something that generates a sort of constant flow of variation, like a city, an ecosystem, or just a mathematical thing like the game of life. Really, any sort of virtual environment that generates a reasonable flow of variation. For step 2, I tried to imagine mostly how to fit a player within the simulation. If I made an ecosystem, I would maybe make the player be a frog or a lion, make his goal to hunt or eat flies. Thanks to the initial simulation, the game will end up with a lot of unpredictable things. So let's take a look at one of the prototypes made using this technique. I call this one Flagula Spordic Realms. It's a game based within a simulation themed in a sort of microbiome. Let's see how the simulation works. In our microbiome, we have a species called Flagula. Flagula are divided in many colonies. Each colony controls hives. All the colonies are in a constant battle over these hives. When a colony controls a hive, with that hive it can spawn its members. Hives are constantly spawning new members. Let's take a look at what this constant battle looks like. Okay, now let's take a closer look to see what's really going on. Here are the rules of how the colonies fight each other. Flagula from the same colony are divided in 3 castes: warriors, tacklers, and seeds. This is a tackler. When tacklers touch enemy Flagula, they tackle them, meaning both their target and them are paralyzed. Here are 2 other tacklers that paralyzed each other. This is a warrior. Warriors eat enemy paralyzed Flagula and save ally paralyzed Flagula. If this warrior touches this Flagula, it will save it. If he touches this one, he will eat it. And finally, seeds are the invading element of this species. If a seed manages to touch a hive, it will invade it, and the hive will change colony. Let's take a look at some action. You can see here, these black ones are paralyzed. This is a warrior about to eat a few paralyzed Flagula. Let's see it happen. Here is another warrior about to save a few ally paralyzed Flagula. Let's see the rescue. Here is a seed potentially going to invade an enemy hive, but unfortunately it gets paralyzed and instantly gets eaten. Let's accelerate time and see how the general battle between the Flagula colonies progresses. At first, each colony started with 1 hive, but some colonies have now started invading each other, meaning some colonies died. Eventually, you would imagine that one colony ends up invading all the others, but I added a little something to stimulate the simulation. Whenever a colony owns more than 10 hives, there is a rebellion and 50% of its hives split off and become a new colony. Let's wait a bit to see some rebellions. Here we go. As you can see, things are getting spicy down there. Colonies that emerge from rebellions that mass spawning in order to gain a foothold in the world, without instantly getting invaded. Each colony keeps track of how many rebellions it had with these counters. Let's move on to the second part of the game design process and see what sort of game I imagined in this environment. In the game, you incarnate a parasite that has invaded the body of a Flagula seed. Your goal is just to survive as long as you can in this hostile world. The seed Flagula whose body you have invaded is represented with this red circle around it. You can control the movements of the seed you invaded. You can get killed the same way any other seed would get killed, by getting paralyzed then eaten. The game works around two special abilities you have. The first is your ability to switch colony by jumping from seed to seed. How does this work? You simply have to get near a seed like you from another colony, and you will jump from seed to seed. Here's an example. As you can see, I make sure to avoid any tacklers that don't belong to my colony, and aim to touch a seed from the colony I want to switch to. This is not easy, and you have to observe things carefully and take any opportunity you can. This ability is crucial for your survival because eventually your colony will be overrun and you will need to move out. Your second ability is your ability to use items. Items are these white things that are hanging around. Every time a colony dies, its last minion leaves behind an item. You can grab them like this, or you can make them connected to you. They become red like this. Now, with a button, you can call your items and they will come to you. The game was meant to expand and have many available items that you can collect to improve your survivability. But for the moment, as this is a prototype, you mainly just have one item that you need to always be looking for. Let me explain. In the game, dying is very common, but with this item, you can make a colony be your home colony, meaning if you die, you will respawn at your home colony. But just because you have a home colony, it doesn't mean you're safe, because eventually your home colony will die. That's why you need to always be looking for items, so you have a backup home colony available to you. Here's how you activate a home colony item. You press a button, it turns green, then your home colony becomes the colony of the first Flagula that ate it. Here's a bit more gameplay footage. As you can see, I'm starting this adventure as part of the pinky orange colony. I'm moving through the very lively environment collecting home base items. Orange is my current home base. I look at the general situation of the world to plan my next move. I notice a beautiful blue colony on the bottom right corner of the field. It seems isolated behind many walls. From experience, this is good for the survivability of the colony, so I decide to make it my new quest to reach it. I'm going to have to pass through the light green colony in the middle. It won't be easy. My first challenge is this transit from here to light green. Then I take a good, easy opportunity that presents itself to me. I'm lucky though, light green is kind of at its early stages of development. Now the final challenge, infiltrating the blue colony. I hesitate a lot. I find a target, I follow it, but suddenly an easier target presents itself. I change my mind and go for it, but now I'm surrounded by purple. That's somehow reached until here. I get paralyzed. My fate is now in the hands of the gods of this biome. I figure though that I might have a chance of being saved, since the blue hives are the closest. After what seems like an eternal wait, a blue warrior saves me, and I'm welcomed into the blue colony. I call the items that belong to me. I have been collecting quite a few since I started. Then I finally make this my home base. So that was a typical small adventure in this prototype. Later in that game I noticed that there was a brown colony on the top left that had been doing very well, so I contemplated about it, because generally the top left spot isn't such a good spot for colonies. For some reason this colony managed to stock up in members and keep a strong potential despite many rebellions. There's still much I don't understand about this world. The prototype is simple, but it shows the potential of the general idea. When you make a simulation of this sort, you're always going to end up with a ton of depth. It's unavoidable if you do things right. One can play around by making the world more complex and varied, or changing the abilities the player has. Eventually, I shall be making another video in which I go more into detail about what sort of game design options I have to continue working on this game. Thanks for watching and goodbye.